Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents United, an Alienated novel by Melissa Landers. Narrated by Madeleine Lambert. Chapter 1. Saturday, May 20th. Lair, the Final Frontier. Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to United, your exclusive source for sneak peeks into the first integrated Lair human colony. I hope you've brought your sunscreen, because we're headed to the beach, baby. You heard me. The colony is set on a lush, tropical island located on the opposite side of the planet from the main continent. Jealous? It's not too late to apply for passage. We're looking for a few good humans to round out our first group of settlers, especially those with a background in agriculture or mechanical engineering. Your skills could help build a whole new society. And if that doesn't get your motor running, I don't know what will. Remember, among the requirements for settlers are a full-scale IQ of at least 130, general wellness, and a healthy reproductive system. Sorry, I don't make the rules. You can download an application online and visit your local Earth Council office for a physical examination and mental screening. I hope to see you around. I'll be the one sporting a goofy smile and a perpetual sunburn. Posted by Cara Sweeney. Cara closed her laptop, taking care to muffle the click so she didn't wake Aelyx, who was snoring lightly from the bunk they shared in her ship's quarters. He slept with one muscled arm curled beneath his head, his loose honey-brown locks hiding his eyes. As if sensing her absence, he grumbled and hugged her pillow to his chest, then gave a contented sigh and murmured something in his native language before drifting off again. It made her smile. In the weeks since they'd left Earth, she'd grown accustomed to sleeping in his arms, too. No matter how quietly either of them padded about the room in the morning, the other would inevitably wake within minutes. They'd become synchronized in their movements, much like the trio of moons that orbited the planet 500 miles below their feet. On silent tiptoes, Cara made her way to the porthole and gazed past the darkness of space to her new home. Lair was barely visible as a ring of light as it eclipsed the distant sun, but she could still picture it from her last visit. An orb of muted indigo, dotted with thousands of tiny islands and 2 continents, one of which housed the entire population of their race. Of course, that was about to change. Once the medics were done quarantining them for Earth cooties, Cara and Aelyx would shuttle down to the colony and begin their new life together. The prospect made her heart flutter. They'd have the whole community to themselves for the first couple of weeks while she finished negotiating the colony charter. It would almost be like a vacation, and they were long overdue for some fun in the sun. Thwarting coups and saving alliances was hard work. It's too early to get up. Aelyx's voice was rough with sleep, in a way that never failed to make her tummy do backflips. When he stretched both arms above his head, it drew her gaze to the contours of his tawny chest and his flat slab of a belly, even more scrumptious without a button. He yawned and murmured, "Come back to bed." He didn't need to ask her twice. Cara climbed beneath the covers and rested her cheek on the perfectly hollowed spot where his shoulder met his chest. His skin was warm, carrying with it the unique, spicy, sweet scent she'd grown to crave more than Hali, the Lair equivalent of coffee. While he wrapped both arms around her and drew her close, she placed a palm over his heart to gauge the strength and rhythm of its beats. "How's the ticker?" she asked, peeking at him through her lashes. "Strong." He covered her hand with his and pressed down so she could feel a steady thump. "Healthy." A wicked grin curved his mouth, and with mischief in his voice, he nuzzled her ear and added, "Ready for anything." Cara let her eyelids drift shut when he gently took her earlobe between his teeth. She didn't know if she had the strength to turn him down this time. 2 weeks ago, a lair weapon had stopped Aelyx's heart. It was a miracle she'd been able to get it beating again, and since then, she'd insisted on giving him a chance to recover before they played their respective V cards. Keeping those cards in their pockets hadn't been easy, for either of them. But with his lips brushing a wayward trail down the side of her neck, Cara was feeling awfully ready, too. Chills broke out across her skin in delicious contrast to the heated blood rushing through her veins. Then he bit that magical place at the top of her shoulder, and her resolve folded faster than a stadium seat. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I don't want to send you back to the great beyond." Aelyx paused long enough to lock their gazes, sharing a brief snippet of his emotions through silent speech. A rush of desire flooded over her, and after that, there was no more chit-chat. Until a few moments later when their comm spheres buzzed in alert. "Fascia," Aelyx swore, raking a hand through his hair. He rolled onto his back and groaned loud enough to vibrate the pillow. "How do they always know?" He jabbed an index finger toward the unused top bunk. "I wouldn't be surprised if there's a camera up there." Cara took a second to steady her breathing before answering the summons. Its signature frequency told her the call came from The Way, Lair's governing body, which now included her as the chief human consultant. Her colleagues weren't spying. She and Aelyx simply had rotten luck. "One of these days, we'll catch a break." She handed over his sphere, and together they spoke their pass keys while tugging the blanket high enough to conceal any exposed skin. An image of the head elder flickered to life, stooped in her miniature form atop the mattress. If Alona was surprised to see them together under the covers, she didn't let it show. Her faded chrome eyes betrayed no emotion as she lifted 2 fingers in the usual lair greeting and droned, "I have wonderful news." You'd never know it from her tone, but that was normal for the elders. They'd practically bred the life out of themselves several generations ago. That was why they needed humans to diversify the gene pool. Cara returned the greeting and waited for her leader to continue. "Your quarantine is complete," Alona said. "I've sent a craft to shuttle you to the colony, where the head of the development panel will greet you." She raised a brow at Cara. "I assume you remember Devinder from your former involvement on the panel?" Cara suppressed an eye roll. She remembered him all right. The old guy was so uptight he practically squeaked when he walked. "Yes, ma'am." "He is now our 10th member of the Way," Alona said. "As the 2 of you are equals, I expect a greater level of collaboration between you." Translation: "No more bickering." "Understood," Cara told her. "Excellent." Alona's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Or indigestion. It was hard to tell with the elders. "What about Jackson and Aelyx?" Cara asked. The genetically altered clones had attempted to overthrow the Way, taking several lives and nearly destroying the Earth-Lair alliance in the process. Afterward, they'd vanished without a trace, which led Cara to believe they had more support than she'd originally thought. Maybe enough support to take them off Earth and back to Lair. "Any news?" "A few possible sightings, but nothing concrete enough to share." Then Alona dismissed her by asking, "Do you require further assistance?" "No, ma'am." "Then you may depart at your leisure." With a brief 2-finger salute, Alona's image vanished in a wisp of gray. Cara heaved a sigh and sat up, then glanced over her shoulder at Aelyx. "We'd better hurry." One thing she'd learned during her portion of the student exchange was "at your leisure" really meant immediately. Even though her position in the Way gave her more power than most citizens, she couldn't disobey a direct order from Alona. Not without consequences. Aelyx pinched the bridge of his nose and squeezed his eyes shut. By now, Karen knew what he was doing, reciting Earth's periodic table of elements, probably forward and backward, judging by the pained look on his face. As soon as he reopened his eyes, Cara latched her gaze onto his silvery irises and used silent speech to repeat what he'd told her weeks ago when she had needed reassurance. Soon we'll be in our new home. No roommates, no bunk beds, no classes. Just you and me and miles of beach. He flashed a weary smile. At this point, I'll believe it when I see it. Come on, she said aloud, tugging on his wrist. I'll race you to the washroom. She winked and added, winner gets anything they want. With that, Aelyx maneuvered around her and bolted for the door, then smacked the keypad and ran into the hallway. Never mind that he was clad in nothing but his boxers. For all their stoicism, Lairs had no modesty. Cara laughed and pulled on a clean uniform, pleased with herself for putting a spring in Aelyx's step. 2 cups of Holly later, they stood in the docking station with their duffel bags planted at their feet. The shuttle was late, so they linked arms and let the hiss of recycled air through the vents fill the silence. Soon the sound of boots against metal turned their attention to the doorway, where Aelyx's best friend, Serene, strode into view, dragging her own duffel behind her. Serene offered a smile, but it didn't touch her eyes, which were bloodshot and puffy from weeks of crying. A sympathy pain needled at Cara's sternum. Serene had lost her Lihan, a young soldier named David, who'd served as her bodyguard and died protecting Aelyx during the attempted coup. They'd brought David's body with them to bury on the colony. Lairs typically cremated their dead, but Cara had intervened for an exception in this case. It was the least she could do. Shuttling to the continent? Cara asked, because she didn't know what else to say. She already knew the answer. Serene was an emotional healer, and more fragile than the other clones. She needed the kind of help they couldn't provide on the colony. The girl gave a slight nod and tugged on her ponytail in a nervous habit she'd recently picked up. I won't be gone long. Will you wait until I'm back before burying David? I want to be at his memorial. Her words cut off with a hitched breath. Aelyx jogged to meet Serene and took her pretty, heart-shaped face between his hands. There was a time when something like that would have made Cara jealous, but not anymore. Serene needed a friend, and no one knew her better than Aelyx. The two exchanged a few quiet murmurs before Cara turned away to give them some privacy. She chewed her bottom lip and stared at the cargo hold, where a cryogenic box held David's remains. His was another senseless murder, just like Serene's first love, a young Lair exchange student who died in China. So many losses. It wasn't fair. But despite that, Cara had hope, both for herself and Serene, that they could put the past behind them and move forward together, stronger than before. Joining the colony was the first step to a brighter future, and the future began today. Chapter 2. Sometimes after waking from a nightmare, a cloud of fear and sorrow followed Aelyx into the realm of consciousness, and he'd have to keep reminding himself that the negative emotions weren't real. They were nothing more than a mental mirage, a trick of his psyche. He felt that way now. Today was the first time Serene had spoken openly to him about David's death, and even though they'd parted an hour ago, her grief had bled into Aelyx's heart and lingered there like a shadow. No matter how tightly he held to Cara's hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that she might vanish if he took his gaze away from her. The experience had left him more than a little shaken. It had also put his problems into perspective. Had he really wasted one moment of his time with Cara brooding because of sex? What right did he have to complain about waiting a little longer when Cara was living and breathing, strapped into the seat beside him as they sped to their new home? To hell with the ache in his gut. He was the luckiest Lair alive. Look at me, he said to Cara while lifting their linked hands to his lips. When she turned her gaze away from the window, he told her, I love you. Her face broke into a smile, enlivening her electric blue eyes and dimpling one freckled cheek. Her look of pure happiness intensified the pain in his belly. At times like these, she was too beautiful to bear. Love you more. She nodded at the window and gave a little bounce of excitement, causing her safety restraints to squeak. We're almost there. Can you believe it now? Her enthusiasm prompted him to peer past her through the glass, though there wasn't much to see. The morning sun hadn't yet burned away the thick layer of fog clinging to Lair's ocean waters, so the view resembled roiling tendrils of smoke trapped beneath glass. Still, a thrill tickled his chest when the shuttle descended into the mist. Regardless of whether he could see the colony, it was down there, and he would stand on its sandy shores within minutes. "Funny how this is my home planet," he said. "But you're the one who's been to the colony." Aside from his visits to Earth, he'd never traveled beyond the continent's 3rd precinct. "Seems backward." Cara sniffed a humorless laugh and slanted him a glance. "Since when has anything between Earth and Lair been normal?" "Point taken." "But don't worry," she said. "I think you'll like the setup. The panel tried to blend both cultures so it won't feel too foreign to anyone. There's even a—" She stopped with a gasp and pressed her forehead to the window. "What's that?" Aelyx leaned in, following the direction of her gaze. The mist had cleared enough to reveal a shadow gliding beneath the surface of the water. As it was twice the size of their shuttle, Aelyx understood why the creature had drawn Cara's attention. He recognized the rounded form at once, even though he'd never before seen one in the flesh. "It's a priva. They feed on microorganisms through slits in their skin. They're very gentle, like a cross between a manta ray and a humpback whale." Cara breathed out in awe, and then the animal was gone as the shuttle sped onward. Before long, something even more thrilling than an oceanic mammoth came into view. A cluster of beige islands, the largest of which showed signs of civilization in the form of tall, multi-story structures constructed from the same gray stone used at the capital. Aelyx pressed nearer to the glass, squashing Cara in the process. She groaned, but there was laughter in her voice. "Guess I should have given you the window seat." "Is that it?" "Yup." She sat straighter, beaming with pride. And for good reason. The community was charming, at least from 100 meters above the ground. Dozens of paved paths wound around the buildings in a linked trail. Upon closer inspection, he realized the paths were roads with a few compact vehicles parked along the shoulder. He identified the main dormitory by its position at the center of the community, bordering an expansive park and what appeared to be a swimming pool. But that couldn't be the case. Recreation wasn't a priority for Lairs, only duty. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked. "If you think it's a solar-heated pool, then yes." She delivered a light elbow nudge. "I negotiated 1 full day a week for leisure time." "Impressive." Cara pointed at the barracks. "That's called the living center. Our unit will have a bedroom and a small lounge, but no bathroom or kitchen." She heaved a sigh. "I fought for more privacy, but the panel insisted on having communal washrooms and a dining hall because it'll force everyone to interact." That made sense to Aelyx. His upbringing in the Aegis had offered him very little privacy, but resulted in close relationships between the students. "Sounds like a good compromise." "I'll remind you of that at 2 a.m. when you have to trek down the hallway to pee." Laughing, he scanned the tiny settlement and continued north to a flat expanse of unoccupied land that stretched across half the island. The soil had been disturbed in tidy rows, which indicated vegetation had recently been planted. "Crops?" he asked. "Mm-hmm. The goal is to be self-sufficient." As the shuttle prepared to touch down on the beach, Aelyx spotted a family of Malay, guarding their collective nest of eggs buried in the sand. The small creatures darted nervous glances at the craft, then used their talon-spiked flippers to drag themselves into the safety of the nearby underbrush. It made him think of Vero, his house pet at the Aegis, particularly all the places the animal had buried scraps of food. Vero had once hidden a full serving of Lena beneath Aelyx's mattress. The stench had lingered for days, driving his roommates to sleep in the lobby. A pang of wistfulness tugged at Aelyx's stomach. He wished he could bring Vero to the colony, but the animal belonged to all the students. When the shuttle landed, Aelyx unfastened his harness in record time and rushed to the door. He jumped to the ground, grinning as the sand shifted beneath his boots, and then he immediately lifted his face to the sun. The gentle caress of warmth made him groan. He'd missed this. Manhattan in winter had been his own personal hell. Right away he noticed the air was different here than on Laire's first precinct, humid and thick with the slightly bitter scents of salt and sea. The island trees bore a light curve, and their oversized beige leaves fanned out directly from each trunk to absorb nutrients from the air. The effect made them resemble tall shrubs instead of trees, but he supposed they were attractive in their own way. In his absence during the exchange, he'd nearly forgotten that the colors of Cara's world didn't exist on his home planet. It had taken him a year to grow accustomed to the vibrant greens of Earth's trees, and now he almost missed them, but not enough to go back. He turned to find Cara standing behind him, watching him with a cautious expression. Clearly his opinion mattered a great deal to her. "Does it feel like home?" she asked him privately. Truthfully, no, it didn't. But after being away from Lair for so long, it felt good to stand beneath a familiar sky. That was enough. And since he couldn't lie through silent speech, he told her, "I'm sure it will." The shuttle pilot startled them by abruptly lifting off, and in the blink of an eye, the craft was gone. That's when it occurred to Aelyx they were alone on a balmy island. A tempting idea came to mind. "Come on," he said while kicking off his boots. "I'll bet the water's as warm as it looks." He towed off both socks and tugged his tunic over his head, but Cara just stood there, biting her lip. She was probably afraid to remove her clothes. Humans had such prudish views regarding the naked form. "It's nothing I haven't seen before," he assured her. "Besides, we're alone." "Actually?" she gulped when he dropped his pants. "We're not." Aelyx glanced past the shoreline to the settlement in the distance. He didn't see any signs of life, not that it mattered. "The clones have showered together since childhood. Your nudity won't shock anyone." And to prove it, he shed his undergarments. Cara's eyes went round while her face flushed. After blinking a few times, she dropped her gaze to the sand. I have to find Devinders so we can go over some colony business, remember?" "Oh." Aelyx had forgotten. It kept slipping his mind that Cara was part of the way. Her appointment to the government had been so abrupt and, quite frankly, bizarre. It also meant he had to obey her every command, but he refused to dwell on that small detail. "Go ahead, then." He thumbed at the gently crashing waves. "I can find ways to occupy myself." "I'll make it up to you," she said as she backed away. "Promise." Aelyx waded into the water, discovering it was as warm as it looked. "Don't worry," he told her. "We have all the time in the world." Chapter 3. Resisting the urge to jet out her bottom lip, Cara watched Aelyx's glistening body slice through the waves with the same lithe movements as a dolphin in pursuit of mackerel. He made it past the breakers within seconds and set off down the shoreline to explore the northern tip of the island, where silky sand gave way to uneven slabs of stone. Clearly the Aegis had taught him to swim. Quite well. But he looked more like an Olympic athlete than a vacationer frolicking in the water. Cara wished she could join him and show him how to have fun. And maybe have some fun of her own. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt the pull of an ocean tide, and she'd never been skinny dipping, not even in the murky lake back home. Aelyx, the workaholic, had beaten her to it. How ironic was that? When she finally turned away and crossed the dunes, she caught a glimpse of the ancient ruins, crumbling at the southern end of the beach, and her footsteps came to a gradual halt. The piles of sand-colored blocks held her gaze, mocking her with reminders of Jackson and Aisley, who were cloned in a Lair laboratory with exhumed remains from the old tomb. Not just cloned, she reminded herself. Supercharged. Jackson and Aelyx had been enhanced with DNA from an advanced, secretive race of aliens called the Aribol, which gave them mind control, and the hybrids weren't Cara's only concern. The Aribol had been showering Lair with mechanical probes for months. Nobody knew what the aliens wanted, but one thing was clear. Even with a strong alliance, humans and Lairs were outmatched. She mused that back in Midtown, her friends were getting ready for prom, browsing magazines for trendy updos and the perfect strappy pumps. She was launching a colony and worrying about an alien invasion. Never a dull moment. Determined to stay positive, she made her way past the dunes to the paved sidewalk and set off to find Devinder. She strode into the fringes of their vacant community and scanned the storefront signs, which were engraved with symbols for those who didn't speak Lair. One shop displayed a stick figure with a needle in its arm. The medic. That was obvious enough. But the adjacent building wasn't as simple to identify. Its sign revealed a tablet with a few lines of nondescript writing on the screen. She hadn't seen anything like it during her time at the Aegis, so she made a mental note to request a guided tour before the first colonists arrived. Humans would look to her for guidance, and she needed to know how to direct them. A few minutes later, she found Devinder seated on a park bench outside the living center, one arm resting on the seat back as he gazed out at the ocean. He spotted her and stood, then strode to meet her in the sluggish, labored steps unique to his generation. His gray-streaked hair was gathered at the nape of his neck in a low ponytail, and his chrome irises had lost some of their gleam. But Cara knew better than to underestimate him. He was the Jell-O fruit salad her mom used to make, soft on the outside, with a surprisingly tart interior. Devinder pressed 2 fingers to the left side of her throat, and she reciprocated, careful not to hold the contact for too long and accidentally make a romantic advance toward him. She'd made that mistake before.
"Welcome back," he told her. "I've heard your visit to Earth was eventful."
"That's putting it mildly," she said. "But before we go on, do you mind if we speak aloud? I'm not very good at silent speech." It wasn't a lie. Not really. She was still learning the nuances of mental communication, but that wasn't the real reason for her request. Devinder reflected for a moment, then scrunched his forehead.
"You believe I'm so tight that I squeak when I walk. I don't understand. What does it mean?"
That was the reason. She couldn't control all of her thoughts, and embarrassing snippets tended to leak out at the worst moments. Cara's cheeks went up in flames while she searched for a response.
"And the shop you passed," Devinder added, pointing in the direction she'd come, "is the Cultural Archive. Comparable to your library system."
That makes sense. She grabbed the opportunity with both hands and shamelessly changed the subject. "I hope you'll take me on a tour before the colonists arrive."
"It would be my pleasure." He gestured at the nearest bench. "We have much to discuss before then."
"Can we begin with the island defense?" she asked, reflexively glancing toward the ruins at the south end of the beach. "What kind of protection will we have against an invasion?" She half expected Devinder to dismiss her as a worry-prone human, but he didn't. Strangely, that made her feel worse.
"The colony will be allowed 1 Capitol Guard squadron."
Cara felt her eyebrows rise. "That's it? What can a dozen guards possibly do?"
"Their presence here is not intended to protect the colonists from an outside force, but to maintain order and administer reckonings."
Reckonings? All thoughts of alien attacks vanished when Cara realized the Way intended to implement their method of justice on the colony. She'd fought vehemently against reckonings, corporal punishment in the form of an electric lash. "I thought we agreed the effete has no place here."
"No," we agreed to suspend the death.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?